Tetsicazul vestasel emigas snezic biolstul elef en geketaz. Zulsha te pivuzu tabdasel elestunus. Zulsha nusel kafrangarabil. Laspa nusel jeboru shaktavakto.
Hey guys, Tesai, NoverMaC, and welcome to another Conlang showcase on this channel. It's been a while and I have been busy. And today I'm showcasing a Conlang that I've, the most recent Conlang that I've made, which is Sigonian, or as written here, or as said in the language, Sigoni. And this is essentially a fan Conlang, a fanlang, or did I say fan art, of a language that's slightly featured in the game Honkai Star Rail, which is a game I really enjoy. I really like the story, I really like the characters. And it's spoken by this character, the one and only Aventurine, who appeared in the Penacony story quest in, I forgot which version, one of those versions. And his home planet is Sigonia, or as I would call it here, Sigon. And written here are two of his names. One is, on the top is Nanilatse, which is, aventuring the mineral in the language of Sigonian. And the bottom one literally just spells out Kakabasha. If you know, you know. I won't spoil anything. So how did I go about making this language? If you played the game, you probably remember that there are some words they have provided in the game in the Sigonian language, but these are all of the words I can find that's in the Sigonian language, or it's heavily related to Sigonia or the language, and it's definitely not in English or Chinese or like the, as I said, galactic common. The first is the planet name, Sigonia, or like in Chinese is Sigonia. And I just thought I would make a compromise on that and call it Sigon, and I thought that's the base root. And so I thought, what could Sigon mean? So I think it's dwelling, a home, a place of belonging. So like, where are you from? I'm from Sigon. And then there are the two names of the clans that we get. One is Katika, and one is Avgin. And then is the goddess, which is called Fengebios, which it doesn't really directly translate as well, but the other name that she's known by is the three-eyed goddess, the three-eyed Earth Mother goddess. I think Gaiathra Triclops, but that's obviously a Greek-based word, so I took Fengebios as meaning literally three-eye. And then is the word Kakava, which is said to be blessed and reborn. So I assume that in this culture it means the same thing. It's a synonym. And then is the word for their chief, which is Lanor. And then finally, I just assume that this is their currency, which is the red copper coin, which they call Pamba. So I just decided to include that in the language, whether it's rooted in the language or it's a borrowed word. So from here, I based the phonology, or the sounds of the language, and some of the declensions or how the nouns are formed, based on all these words. As you can probably tell from the sample, that the consonants of this language include m, n, b, p, b, d, k, d, g, k, g, z, ch, j, f, v, s, z, sh, ch, h, l, y, r. And the vowels are a standard 5-vowel system, which is I, U, E, O, A. And you may be wondering, oh, hey, Nover, I've seen the very pretty writing before. How does that work? Well, I assume it's pretty. I think it's pretty. We all have subjective standards of beauty and aesthetics, but yeah. So this is a Ruva of this language, which I can describe as a cross between an alphabet and an abugida, in which case it's written like an alphabet, but every consonant has an inherent vowel, namely a. So, like, as you can see, the single sound ma is written by a single character, a single letter. And if you want to write a plain vowel, you write the vowel, like you write the a, e, o, u. And if you want to write the sound of a consonant followed by another vowel that's not a, you just write the symbol for, like, for example, pa, and followed by an e. Then you, instead of reading pa, e, you read pe. And furthermore, you see written in blue, which is a diacritic known as a suppression marker, which suppresses a vowel of a letter. And you can see example here, where the letter on the left reads the syllable ba, and the letter on the right is ba with a suppressing diacritic, which just reads a plain b. And then you have the cursive form of the writing, where when you want to write quickly, when you want to scribble down notes, when you want to, make everyday use of the script and doesn't want to write in the full printout letters, you use this form, which, as you can see, is much more flowy compared to the printout version. And credit to Zikli for creating this cool cursive style of the writing, which I heavily borrowed from. Anyway, in addition to the letters I have shown before, in the cursive version of the script, there are several ligatures that have been created and are commonly used to write certain consonants with the suppression markers. Most notably ch, l, n, d, r, and s. So let's move on to the word order. So primarily it's a SVO language, but can switch to VSO word order for questions and for subjunctive sentences. It is a prepositional language, and nouns follow the prepositions, demonstratives, numbers, adjectives, genitives, and relative clauses. So for example, the sentence she is the chief, or zinumon la non la. And as you can see that it's she is the chief, translated exactly. So here is subject, verb, object. But in the subjunctive sentence, may she eat sand, which is a common insult in this culture, or as I say, tetzijazul misel zi shlomal. Here we can see that tetzijazul misel, which is the verb, is put in the first position, followed by the subject, zi, and then the object, shlomal, which is sand. So now we covered the word order, now move on to the nouns. There are three grammatical genders that nouns are categorized in: the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. Masculine words almost always end with the vowel a. For example, the word lava, which means man. And the feminine usually ends with a e, like kezi, woman. And the neuter usually end with a e, like mashe, or friend. Nouns usually follow this rule for what gender it is categorized in, but there are type 2 nouns, which are nouns borrowed into the language at a later point, and it has a different paradigm. Masculine nouns are usually ending with a s, like yaros, which means moon. The feminine usually ends with a n, like shmun, which means sun. And the neuter usually ends with a ra, like vedor, or person. So in this language, adjectives agree with the nouns in gender and number. For example, smiton ninkon, which means good sister, where the n marks the feminine singular. But if you want to say good brothers, which is a masculine plural form, you have to say smitosu frelosu, where su marks the masculine plural. But what if the adjectives and the nouns are of different type? Well, you do this. For example, the green tortoise is nana hagnema. Here, both the adjective and the noun are type 1, where nana is green, hagnema is tortoise. But if you want to say something like a green gun, where the word for green is type 1 and the gun is type 2, then you say nana jayas, where again you have gender agreement, but here you have to adapt them to their respective declension patterns. And speaking of declensions, you see this declension table, where you have type 1 and type 2 nouns, where you see 3 genders and 2 numbers, along with the respective 8 different cases. Nominative, which marks the subject of the sentence, the accusative, marking the object of the sentence, the vocative, marking the direct addressee, the genitive, which marks the possessor of an object, the dative, marking the indirect object of a sentence, the locative, which marks the location, the ablative, which marks movement away from something or somewhere, the instrumental and comitative, which marks basically the word with, and the benefactive, which marks who benefits from an action, or to what or to whom the action is for. And you see this pattern in the pronouns as well, but in addition to the previous cases, you have this reflexive form of the pronoun, which means oneself. So here's yourself, ourself, himself, etc. But here you see the pronoun pattern, so first person singular, second person singular, third person masculine singular, third person feminine singular, third person neuter singular, first person plural, second person plural, third person plural, and first person singular informal. You really don't want to address yourself as Sinda when you're in a formal or semi-formal situation. It is very rude. So now that we've talked about nouns, let's move on to verbs. So the verbs in Sigoni comes in 3 parts, where you have a tense prefix, followed by the root, followed by the person or the modifier. What do I mean by that? So here are the modifiers, which marks the infinitive, the perfect participle, the present participle, and the imperative, which is marked as null. And the person endings are as you would expect, but there are 2 forms. One is for regular, and one is for the imperfect or conditional forms of the verb. Yeah, and you have 3 tense prefixes when you have the present tense, when you have the imperfect, and you have a unmarked past / nomic. So the past action is unmarked because it happened, it's set in stone, you can't change it, is a fact. And additionally, you have several auxiliary verbs to express other aspects, other tenses, other moods. So here is the progressive, the future, the conditional, the permissive, and the optative. Here you can see each of these verbs have the ending cell, which is the infinitive. So if you want to express any of these ideas, you put the verb you want to say in the infinitive, and you follow it by the conjugated version of the auxiliary verbs. Let me show you with examples. Here we see the sentence, Paura kamsel tehio par koplil, or we are currently setting the flower. Here, paura can be skipped, can be dropped, because it is expressed in the conjugation. Kamsel is sell in the infinitive, or to sell. Tehiopar, which is the verb conjugated. Te is the present tense prefix. Hio, as we have just seen, is the auxiliary verb for the progressive aspect, which in English is marked by ing. And par is the imperfect first person plural suffix. So here, kamsel tehio par, it literally means we are currently selling. And finally, koplil is flower put in the accusative aspect. A simpler sentence would be Zit frelos kitaizul kitinil, or her brother sang a song. So word for word is her brother, he sang song. Now let's move on to adjectives. As we have seen previously, adjectives follow the same declension pattern as nouns, and as such, when declined as a noun, it can be seen and treated as a noun. For example, here, the sentence Romisel kluf haranel, which literally means I will eat a red. Here, it's implied it's a red object, a red thing. I will eat something that's red. But if we simply don't mark it with case endings and put it before a noun, then it is, it works as a regular adjective. So here it's Je m'sel trouverai rani del bonla. I will eat a red fruit. Here, rani del bonla is, literally red fruit. There are 3 demonstratives in Sigoni. This, ñol, that, prava, and the relative pronoun, enme. So ñol and prava works as you would expect for, similar to the words this and that. But the relative pronoun is something that we need to look at, where it marks a relative clause in a sentence. An example. Enme gorzul la nosla shisvedor shabiazul jayasla. The outworlder who killed the chief shot the gun. Here, in the English sentence, who killed the chief is the relative clause. And here is correspondingly marked as eme gorzul la nosla. Here it precedes the noun it describes, where the clause eme gorzul nalosla literally means who killed the chief. So that's the basics of the Sigonian language. And now I will read out a translated scene from the Penacony story quest that's to do with the backstory of Aventurine. So, massive spoiler alert, it is spoilers. But yeah, I also spent a lot of time translating this, so hope you enjoy.
Creverexose, cluf hajum le, thro parale elach remaka kava bem hokal, thro buluzul nuzul kuvamen bo kamvi berin kakava bem hokal. Vechta chivel, sindap hivu haelach miolval, Sigonai kudreye. Enelim shutru kasal vedoru lil miotsud erosla. Spelirezim ha en melon chiole bagel. Shadiot miskiva elach giakorshal antos nimbach brava gorvalartu. Hahum joset hu halon eros hinule kapfal, kuf rudacha eilu. Elion elach kapfaga yab, nu chuhat nindil. Thorchom terle elion? Trollof ha emme elach nierdich ter eros he nuzul balal. Ses gorkesaf elion, rudaha elen grev, creverci der begdo. Srashadiot tokle heg centil yulkuzo. Kesaf dor mushach, kak vachi jum. Zornub zasel kluzul elach vioki nuzul bastil. Elion nu le chumpel. Mirastel techio chahat min bel. Srotedecole elion elach dones nu sel kluzul zimemval. Sindach nuzul kokozikto hospesha. Cabneblis fnorf derbes asen la spaga ratzul emme membo eilu chanis la rufokiru. Hahum elach nuzul smitorjura. Spe erroru tu vemiru carujum kio kus nildinaru emme membot hip hat fokis la elos. Sra, lil pivo elach skagel nuzul li javal. Mitsule elion terdo. Cel? Hatsalemi, mitsule elion terdo du nesla rudasel hat? Ho, te diechale zimsel lomnyo? Bulu, bebotan bach, elenlaz, shelenlaz. Jo te diecha hasis yusel yul elion. Bebo bagego keta, preftan bach. Silaz jo bulu hakyak vachi jumsel. Lofsel bulule lon kuzo hatzol. Thro te simale? Haha, thro te diechale sis yusel lon yul hat? Smitos. Elach nuzul humil. Lilash, hahum praval nuzul rishkelas. Fterbe, lil bits elach xindel. Te trachlil nuzul elach dirval guchad. Elo eginkinule heg bioscinla. Heg enme nuzul chijiva zoch basaz ergages itvachekera rujosla. Heg nullon jumle yul ellen bioscinul elaskagolo. Ad nu lon lashbajumle. חצ'מה עד לצ'מה גוצ'ד. ליל דיפוחת כפיה.